Warning, this episode may contain disturbing content, soothing narration, and mild existential dread. Basically, murder ASMR for stressed professionals. Listener discretion is advised. Hell, it might be necessary.
It has been foretold. Those are the kinds of words you expect to hear from a prophet, a mystic, or some ancient wizard at the beginning of a fantasy novel. Not from a career criminal with a rap sheet longer than most resumes. But months before one of Australia's deadliest nightclub fires, a man named John Stuart was telling anyone who would listen that a club was going to burn. He told police. He told reporters. He told nightclub owners. According to Stuart, an organized crime syndicate was moving in with a new protection racket. First, they would firebomb an empty club to prove they were serious. And if that didn't work, they would burn a club full of people. Nobody listened, and why would they? John Stuart wasn't exactly a model citizen. He had served prison time for attempted murder and spent much of his life in and out of trouble with the law. He was known as a thief, a car thief, a violent offender, and by many accounts, a very deeply troubled man. Paranoid, unstable, convinced he knew things that others didn't. But Stuart insisted this was different. You see, despite a lifetime of criminal activity, Stuart claimed there was one line that he would never cross: killing innocent people, and he was becoming increasingly desperate to stop someone else from crossing it. Then, on February 25th, 1973, an empty Brisbane nightclub called Torinos was firebombed, just as Stuart had warned. A week and a half later, in the early morning hours of March 8th, 2 drums of gasoline were ignited inside the foyer of the Whisky Au Go Go nightclub. The fire blocked the main escape route almost immediately, and within minutes, 15 people would be dead. And police would begin searching for the man who had said it was going to happen. So was John Stuart a prophet, a paranoid criminal, a willing participant, or something far more complicated? Today we're diving into one of Australia's most infamous fires, the Whisky Au Go Go fire on Crime to Burn. Welcome to Crime to Burn, where we explore the dark, sooty landscape where true crime intersects with arson and criminal negligence. Join us as we sift through the ashes to bring you the story of what really happened. Welcome back to Crime to Burn. I'm April, a fire protection engineer, former firefighter, and part-time horrified historian of arson cases.
And I'm the senior consultant for accidental hypnosis. I'm strictly tracking April's vocal frequency to ensure she doesn't inadvertently brainwash our listeners with science.
If you're new here, we could really use your help. Please leave us a 5-star rating on your podcast player of choice. Apple Podcasts and Spotify are especially helpful for discoverability, but will happily accept praise anywhere you're willing to leave it. We're currently still sitting at 77 ratings on Apple Podcasts and 74 on Spotify. We don't have any new written reviews this week, but we would like to thank Glory, Just Becky, and Sophie Brown for your comments over on Podbean. We appreciate you taking the time to interact with the show. I have continued my recent trend of being mostly absent from social media because adulting has become especially obnoxious over the last few weeks. Nothing is resolved, everything is expensive, and I've repeatedly considered abandoning civilization to become some sort of woodland cryptid.
Wait, what?
Unfortunately, I don't actually like camping all that much, so I never make it much further than the manicured part of our yard.
If you ever get serious about that cryptid business, though, hit me up, man. I got some ideas.
But if I do manage to emerge from my cave and post something, please help us out. Like, comment, favorite, share, sacrifice a goat to the algorithm, whatever your platform prefers. You can find us on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and X. You can also check out our spread shop. We've got some great merch, and you'll find the link in the show notes. And while financial support is never required, we would like to welcome Brittany, our newest Cult of Steve Patreon member. Welcome, Brittany. May your snacks always be blessedly satisfying and your audio forever ad-free. If Patreon isn't in the budget, don't worry about it, because Crime to Burn will always be free on your favorite podcast player. And as always, send us your comments, feedback, case suggestions, personal fire stories, or tell me about the thing that nearly sent you over the edge this week. The straw that broke the camel's back. The thing that almost made you crash out. Because friends, the number of crash outs I've had this week, let's just say we're one mildly inconvenient email away from becoming cryptids.
I don't know which way to cheer.
Now join me in the time machine as we slip on some polyester, step up onto our platform shoes, and grow our bush out to 70s adult movie standards.
Yeah.
Because it's 1973 in Brisbane, Australia, and tonight we're headed out to the clubs. Now, this night is going to end in horror. I'm not going to bury the lead here. But to understand how this case went from being foretold to being a shock to everyone to becoming one of Australia's most enduring criminal controversies, we need to understand Brisbane's nightclub scene in the early 1970s. Because the clubs weren't operating in a vacuum. Brisbane's nightlife industry was awash in cash, alcohol, gambling, vice, and organized crime. Club owners, criminals, police, bookmakers, and assorted colorful characters often found themselves operating in many of the same circles. And depending on who you talked to, the line between legitimate business and organized crime could be difficult to see. There was rumors of corruption everywhere. Stories of protection money, intimidation, extortion, and firebombings circulated through the city's nightlife scene. Some were undoubtedly exaggerated, but others were all too real. And into that environment stepped a man named John Stuart. Not the comedian.
Thank goodness.
Now, Stuart claimed he knew exactly what was coming. According to him, criminals were preparing to make an example out of Brisbane's nightclub industry. First, an empty club would be burned, and then, if the message wasn't received and protection money didn't start rolling in, they would target a crowded nightclub. It sounded outrageous. It sounded paranoid. And considering the source, most people dismissed it. After all, John Stuart wasn't a police officer or a politician or a respected businessman. He was a career criminal. One that was exceptionally violent and considered dangerous. The problem was that before long, events would begin unfolding exactly the way Stuart had said they would. One of those clubs was the Whisky Au Go Go. Now, it was named after the famous Los Angeles nightclub, but the Australian version was Whisky Au, like for Australia.
Oh, not for gold.
Right. And the Australian version opened in March of 1972, just a year before the fire that would make it infamous. Now, the club occupied the second floor of a mixed-use building on Brisbane's Brunswick Street. Down below were ordinary businesses, a tile shop, a sewing machine repair business, a hair salon, the sort of places you might walk past without thinking twice. But after dark, patrons headed for the foyer and climbed a flight of stairs to the nightclub above. Now, the whiskey itself was very long and narrow, and at one end set a stage where bands and performers entertained crowds night after night. The club also included a kitchen, dressing rooms for the entertainers, and restroom facilities for patrons, and a few offices. Now, the business was owned by brothers Ken and Brian Little, two men trying to make a success of Brisbane's growing nightclub scene. Running the day-to-day operations, though, was another matter. Initially, the club's manager was a man named I think it's Hannay, H-A-N-N-A-Y, and his responsibilities included booking entertainment and overseeing operations. And later, when the Little brothers expanded their business interests and opened a second venue, Hannay would move to manage that location. His position at the Whisky Au Go Go would be filled by another man named Bell. At the time, none of them could have imagined that within a year the Whisky Au Go Go would become one of Australia's most notorious crime scenes. When the Little brothers purchased the whiskey, they needed to pass a fire inspection. And according to records cited by Jeff Plunkett in the Whisky Au Go Go massacre, the first inspection concluded that the means of escape from these premises, which are designed for cabaret purposes, are satisfactory. Now, as a fire protection engineer, those are the kinds of words I like to see in an inspection report. But unfortunately, that wasn't the end of the inspections. A subsequent inspection, sometime in mid-1972, identified, quote, unauthorized modifications, unquote, which included changes to the reception area near the first floor entrance. The report apparently noted that these alterations were some sort of violation, but the author never actually provides us much detail about exactly what had been changed or what other deficiencies may have existed. And then came another inspection in September of 1972, and y'all, this club had only been open for about 6 months. So at this point I find myself asking, was Brisbane's fire brigade simply the most diligent inspection agency in recorded history? Or was somebody repeatedly complaining about the club? Or Were inspectors already concerned about the conditions at the Whisky? Or was this simply routine follow-up activity that only looks suspicious 50 years later when you're reading about a building that eventually burned and talking about how organized crime had its fingers in nightclubs and protection rackets?
Who would have guessed that was happening anywhere?
But the frustrating answer is I don't know. And neither does the author, at least not from the records that were available to him in that book I mentioned. What we do know is that the Whisky found itself attracting the attention of inspectors more than once during its very short existence. And on that final inspection, the commission ordered the club's windows sealed. They ordered the winding mechanisms removed and the windows permanently fixed shut by riveting the frames into place. Now, if you're a fire protection engineer, you may be asking yourself, how does making the windows inoperable make the building safer? And the answer is, it doesn't. The issue wasn't fire safety, the issue was noise. Neighbors had reportedly complained about the club, and the solution was to ensure that fresh air would no longer be an option for the patrons of the Whisky Au Go Go. The commission concluded that the building's air conditioning system provided adequate ventilation, and therefore all of the windows could be sealed.
I would like to bring up a point that, I'm not an expert on anything, but I know that if you put a bolt in a window, it doesn't make it any quieter.
Right. I think that they thought that the noise issues were because the Whisky Au Go Go would open their windows at night.
They're soundproof, bulletproof windows.
Right. And it doesn't seem to have caused have fixed the problem.
No.
Yeah, I know. It's pretty shocking.
Okay.
So congratulations, everyone. The nightclub is now effectively windowless. Unfortunately, that was not the only issue noted during the inspection. Inspectors also observed that the rear exit lacked any sort of illuminated exit sign. It wasn't marked at all. And that the landing serving the rear fire escape was cluttered with boxes and debris. Now, if you've listened to this show for any length of time, you already know where my eye immediately goes, because at this point, the Whisky Au Go Go had exactly two practical means of escape. There was the one main entrance foyer and stairway that everyone used to enter the club, and then there was this fire escape, the one that wasn't marked and the one that was cluttered with boxes and debris. And that's it. And inspectors at this time of the last inspection were documenting that one of those was obstructed. You know, the emergency one. The one people might need if, say, the main stairway became suddenly unavailable. Like it did on Thursday, March 8, 1973. At approximately 2:08 in the morning, with roughly 50 patrons and staff inside the Whisky Au Go Go, an arsonist or arsonists struck. 2 containers of gasoline, one that held approximately 4 gallons and the other approximately 5 gallons, were thrown into the foyer at the base of the club's main stairway. Reports indicate that the containers had been prepared so that the gasoline would immediately spill across the floor, soaking the entrance area, and then someone lit a match. And just like that, the Whisky Au Go Go was on fire. I think any fire investigator would immediately wince at the idea of 9 gallons of gasoline dumped inside the building's main entry and exit point. And gasoline doesn't burn politely. It produces tremendous heat, large quantities of smoke, and spreads fire very rapidly. And in this case, this fire had been deliberately set in the worst possible location, the club's primary means of escape. The foyer and stairway effectively became a chimney, and heat and smoke were drawn upward toward the open doors leading into the nightclub above. And when the fire was first discovered, someone ran to retrieve a fire extinguisher from the kitchen. But by the time they returned, the fire had grown so beyond anything that a portable extinguisher had any chance of stopping, and inside the club the conditions deteriorated with terrifying speed, and visibility disappeared. Patrons struggled to orient themselves as people searched desperately for exits, and smoke continued to fill the building. Now, some people did escape by breaking windows and jumping onto awnings below. Others climbed through dressing room windows to reach safety on the roof of the building next door. But many headed for that rear fire escape, and that's where they encountered a set of problems. The rear exit was not marked with an illuminated exit sign, and the door itself was designed so that once it closed behind you, you could not re-enter the building. Inspectors had also previously noted boxes and stored materials obstructing portions of that escape route, including buckets of cooking oil that had found their way back into that area. At some point during the evacuation, one of those buckets was overturned. Survivors later reported that people reaching the escape stairs would slip and fall on the oil, and some actually suffered broken bones from attempting to flee. And even if you successfully made it down the fire escape, your ordeal wasn't over. Because the rear exit didn't lead into an open street. It led into an enclosed courtyard with a 6-foot metal gate. So patrons who escaped the burning building found themselves trapped once again and forced to climb a locked gate before they could finally reach safety. 15 people would not make it out of the Whisky Au Go Go. And for those trapped inside, the fire moved far faster than anyone had expected. But let's talk a little more about that rear exit. Because I told you already it locked behind you once you stepped outside. But that wasn't the only problem. Even from inside the building, opening the door wasn't particularly intuitive. Patrons had to operate the lock correctly, ensuring the locking button remained undepressed while turning the abloy lock wheel approximately 45 degrees clockwise to release the door.
What's an abloy?
I don't know, but they were very specific about it, so I left it in my research.
Abloy.
Abloy.
A type of disc detainer lock known for its high security and resistance to picking.
Well, that's the kind of lock they had. And I thought it was funny because it said to operate the lock, you had to ensure the lock button remained undepressed. And I was like, did anyone try putting it on Zoloft?
Bring it a clown.
And that was after they had already figured out the door at the top of the stairs, which was not a swinging door, but a sliding door.
So it didn't approach other couples for sexual relations.
Nope. Now, if you're familiar with the door and familiar with the lock and standing in a well-lit building under normal conditions, these are probably an inconvenience. But if you're trapped inside a burning nightclub surrounded by thick smoke, panicked patrons, and rapidly deteriorating conditions, this is a different story. At this point, you've now transformed your emergency exit into an escape room puzzle, and the price for getting it wrong is death. And remember that inspection report that had noted a lack of illuminated exit signs? The one that the Littles had said were being installed within 2 weeks of that last inspection? Well, it wasn't there. There was still no marked emergency exit. And as the smoke filled the club, visibility dropped rapidly. Survivors described thick black smoke spreading through the building, and the walls that surrounded the unmarked exit door, they were painted black. So now imagine you're disoriented, struggling to breathe, crawling through a smoke-filled nightclub looking for an exit that isn't marked and blends into its surroundings and requires a specific sequence of actions to operate. That's not an emergency exit anymore, folks. So let's do a quick fire protection engineering Hall of Shame. But before I start going through this, I need to be fair. Other than the violations that were specifically identified in those inspection reports, I don't know whether every one of these conditions actually violated applicable building codes in Brisbane in 1973. What I can tell you is that if you handed me those plans today, I would have questions, lots of questions, starting with that foyer stair. Now, the fire was deliberately set at the base of the primary stairway with open doors connecting the stair to the club above, so the entire stairwell effectively became a giant chimney, pulling the heat and smoke directly into the occupied space. There is a reason modern codes generally require exit stairs to be enclosed. And yes, there are exceptions. You can still find open communicating stairs in certain occupancies, but those are typically sprinkler protected, and they usually don't count as one of your required means of egress. Because when a fire starts at the bottom, everyone at the top suddenly has a bad day. And then we have that secondary escape route. It was not a clearly marked swinging exit door, it was a sliding door that led to a stairwell that was reportedly being used for storage, a stairwell that wasn't marked with an illuminated exit sign, and a stairwell whose entrance was surrounded by black painted walls. Which means that when thick black smoke filled the club, the patrons were expected to locate an unmarked, dark-colored opening in an already dark environment. Then after finding the escape route, descending the stairs and avoiding all those stored materials and making it outside, occupants would still find themselves in an enclosed courtyard where they had to navigate another gate arrangement before they could reach safety. Now, there was a fire extinguisher in the kitchen, and I suppose points can be awarded there for effort, but against 9 gallons of gasoline deliberately dumped and ignited at the base of a primary means of escape, a portable extinguisher was less of a fire protection strategy and more of a very optimistic suggestion. The windows had also been riveted shut following noise complaints, and several survivors ultimately escaped by breaking those same windows and climbing out. And then, because apparently the universe felt this evacuation wasn't complicated enough, a bucket of cooking oil was overturned during that evacuation, coating portions of the escape route and causing some of the fleeing occupants to slip and suffer injuries like broken bones. Now, did any one of these conditions kill 15 people? No, the arsonists did that. But when we study historic fire disasters, we often find the same patterns, that the fire starts the emergency and the building determines how many people survive it. And that brings us to a question that's haunted investigators from the very beginning. Why would someone firebomb a nightclub? Well, according to one man, the entire thing had been foretold, not by a psychic and not by a prophet, and certainly not by someone you'd expect the police to take seriously. The man making the prediction was a career criminal named John Stuart. Months before the Whisky Au Go Go burned, Stuart had been telling anyone who would listen that Brisbane's nightclub scene was about to be targeted. He told police, he told reporters, he told nightclub owners.
He told police?
He did.
That's pretty bold.
Yeah. According to Stuart, criminals were preparing to send a message. First, they would burn an empty club. And if that didn't get everyone's attention and get them to start turning over protection money, they would burn a nightclub full of people. Now, most people dismissed the warnings as the ramblings of a paranoid criminal. But then on February 25th, 1973, an empty Brisbane nightclub called Torinos was firebombed, just as Stuart had predicted. And suddenly, his warnings didn't seem quite so ridiculous. And Stuart wasn't done talking. Because after the Torinos fire, he continued warning that another nightclub was going to burn, a bigger nightclub, a busy nightclub, a nightclub full of people. And then less than 2 weeks later, at 2:08 in the morning on March 8, 1973, the Whisky Au Go Go erupted into flames. And it was a firebombing. And investigators suddenly found themselves asking a very uncomfortable question. How did John Stuart know? But who was John Stuart? Well, that depends on who you ask. To some people, Stuart was a career criminal, a thief, a gang member, a violent offender, an accused rapist, although the allegations never seemed to result in a prosecution. And to others, he was a deeply disturbed man who saw conspiracies everywhere he looked. And to Stuart himself, well, he was something else entirely. Because Stuart claimed that one of the most important convictions on his record should never have happened. Years earlier, Stuart had gone to prison for manslaughter, a manslaughter conviction he insisted was a frame-up. According to Stuart, he had not committed the crime. Instead, he believed he had been deliberately set up and sacrificed by corrupt police and criminal associates. And when he was finally released from prison, Stuart became convinced of something else. He believed the police intended to pin every major crime in Brisbane on him. Paranoid delusion? Or the excuse of a guilty man? Or the uncomfortable truth? The problem for investigators was that by March of 1973, John Stuart had accurately predicted 2 firebombings. And the more they dug into his life, the stranger the story became. Because the story of John Stuart does not begin with the Whisky Au Go Go. And it doesn't even begin with organized crime. And it doesn't begin with prison. It begins with a childhood that would shape the rest of his life. And that's where we'll start next time on Crime to Burn.
We gotta go all the way back to this guy's childhood. This could be a long-ass episode. Series of episodes.
I have touched the record button.
You touch it real good?
Uh-huh.
How did the record button feel about that?
She's in the wine rack.
What are you doing? You're like a squirrel. Chasing our own tail through the wine rack. Pulling a gopher out of a hole. What do we do with it? Just gonna go back in there?
The kitten has been banished from the studio once again.
I secured the kitten.
You got a farmer's tan.
What a ripoff. I'm still not a farmer. I'm never gonna be a farmer. Never, ever, ever.
Plow my fields just fine. Cinnamon Toast Crunch with chocolate milk instead of white milk in it. It's not going to be a favorite.
I can't believe you even did that.
Well, I really wanted cereal.
I don't think I've ever wanted cereal that bad.
But you don't want to combine the chocolate milk with the fruity cereals. That's where you go all wrong.
I wake up with jokes and sarcasm, but they're not for the public. Not for public consumption. My terribly sharp wit hasn't been tempered with alcohol yet.
In your dreams, do you ever know what's about to happen before it happens in your dreams?
Sometimes I know that in this world. If it's my dream, why wouldn't I know it was going to happen before it happened? Doesn't that make sense?
It does. But, like, why are they surprising?
Well, that's a good question. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how to rectify the things that it seems like we don't want to experience in dreams versus the potential fact that we're making them up ourselves. I'm like, are we gaslighting ourselves in our sleep?
That seems like the most logical explanation.
What are you gonna do? Get mad at yourself?
You ever woken up mad at somebody for something they did in a dream?
No, but I've woken up and had people mad at me for things that I supposedly did in a dream. You can't even verify any of this. I mean, no one has any evidence. I'm losing it, Margaret. There is no pleasing you. I'm not going to dissuade you from delicious empanadas.
Does that feel better?
Not really. I have a squid. It's not really a squid, but it's squid adjacent.
Squid adjacent.
Stop doing that.
Never. I had a frog in my throat.
Don't let them stay in there too long. They lay eggs.
Got an ant in my go-go boots.
I've never heard that one.
I haven't either.
You just made that up?
I was trying it out.
That's original. Hey, good job. What was locked? I can't stand the suspense.
And that was after that they'd figured out the door at the top of this. Hey, man, I am not good at the talking.
Hey, are you having a stroke?
No.
And then he was in first grade. And then his teacher didn't like his homework. And so he burned an apple on her table. But did you know that you can send a postcard addressed to another post office? They will, in an envelope. You address it to that postmaster. He will open the envelope. He will take out the unpostmarked prepaid. What are we sending? Postcard. He will take out that postcard, mark it with his stamp from his state, and mail it on to the recipient.
I didn't know that.
It's fact. You can totally hide paper trail of postcard.
Fascinating.
You can't hide it from the government, but you can hide it from people.
How did you learn this trick?
Oh boy. Just random fact in my head. I don't know, man.
I know it wasn't for you. Who were you trying to get out of trouble?
I don't think it's just something I know. It's not like that.
That's what they all say.
That's what I would say if I was doing something like that. I was in a state other than New York, and I wanted a really good cannoli. Am I the one with the cannoli, or do you have the cannoli? I think you need to look up images of cannolis for a minute. I would be horribly misshapen, like you leave a hot dog in a microwave too long or something.
Oh.
Sounds like something that needs plastic surgery. Some of them look taco-ish. I don't got a taco. It's more like a churro. It's twisty and suspiciously dusty.
It's been 82 years.
82 years.
I was quoting the old lady in Titanic.
Oh, gross. Who was she propositioning?
She wasn't.
I would have said no thanks too, man. And look, if you're that old, you don't want to lube somebody up. You might accidentally squish them between your fingers and shoot them across the room. It's usually the very small, short, statuted people that you see holding hands, 90 years old, eating a damn cheeseburger.
I would make a great turtle.
I'll apologize later. I'm riding that turtle. I have a turtle saddle and a backpack ready to go. Really, any animal in this world can cause some chaos in your life.
Full of chaos and whimsy.
Whimsy. Plenty of whimsy. Whimsy right into my wine rack. It's never USD inspected possum. It's not a thing. So anyway, don't join the gang. Good night.
Crime to Burn is a production of Crime to Burn LLC, where we light fires in your brain and not your buildings. All rights reserved. Still spiritually parched after this episode? It's okay, Steve believes in cross-pollination. Here's a trailer for a show we think deserves to infiltrate your ear holes, in a good way. Don't forget to leave a 5-star review before you go. Steve is watching.
Hi, everyone. We are the hosts of Like Mother, Like Murder, a true crime momcast.
You heard that right. We are a momcast, which is our unique twist in the true crime world.
What sets us aside is that our content is mainly mom-related, from missing moms to murdered moms,
to moms who committed the crime, survivors, and more.
We are getting started on our 3rd season with over 100 episodes that you guys can go and binge. I am Rachel.
And I'm Heather. We drop new episodes every Tuesday wherever you get your podcasts at Like Mother,
Like Murder.